Today I stole a title. If you're looking at your bulletin notes, it's how to be how not to be, but how to be an ideal Christian idiot. And I stole that title from Chris Brown when he was going through this. I go, that's a great title. Sometimes we are. We're all idiots in some areas, aren't we? We don't know everything. There's a whole bunch of library books that you can write. The Complete Idiot's Guide to, and whatever, just put it in. Someone once gave me a book, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Auto Mechanics. When I was in Wisconsin, I've told this story, but I couldn't start my car. I couldn't. And I didn't know what was going on. I popped the hood and looked at it. I didn't know what to look for, but I popped the hood. And I'm just looking, and I was a youth pastor, and some of these kids in high school, they came over and said, we'll help. We took auto mechanics. So they looked, and they all started laughing. I go, what's wrong? They go, someone stole your battery. It's right, obvious, it's right there. You have no car battery. And I go, man. So then they gave me the Complete Idiot's Guide to Auto Mechanics. So I know a little bit. I don't really know anything about auto mechanics. But sometimes you see silly things that go on. Well, Samson is kind of that idiot Christian. He had so much potential, so much going for him, and he just didn't do what was right. This is the theme verse. We say it every week. In those days, Israel did what was ever right in their own eyes. And have you ever done that? People just say, well, you have to do what you have to do. No, you have to do what's right in God's eyes. Yet, Samson is written in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, which is called the Hall of Faith in some ways. It talks about these men and women of great faith. And Samson's there. And you go, are you kidding me? And yet God says, it's impossible to please God without faith. You got to have some kind of faith in your life. And so we look at this and look at Samson. And this is where Samson grew up. If you have never been to Israel, up there in the corner is a map of the Mediterranean Sea, kind of looking east. And you see the green hills, and then you see the Sea of Galilee up there on the left and the Dead Sea down there. The Philistines lived along the coast, and the Israelites lived up on the hills between the Mediterranean and the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. That's all it is. It's just a little tiny area. And yet a lot of people from Europe and from Africa and Asia, they always would go through that green stretch of land in between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea. And so that's where most of the Bible stories are. And then you see this picture here, this area where Gideon grew up. And he's up in the hill country. I want you to just get this in your head. The hill country is where all the Israelites lived, and then you're looking down toward this plain where the Philistines lived. And they were a cruel people that learned how to build tall buildings, and they liked to eat and have parties and all that stuff. We talked about that last week, and yet that's where Samson grew up. He's up in the hill country, and you see these Bible maps all the time. These are some of the things that Samson did throughout his life. His job mainly was to harass the Philistines. Just make their life miserable. He didn't actually lead Israel. He was a loner. He was all by himself. He had all these blessings that God had given to him. Miraculous birth, we talked about last week. His mother wasn't expecting and couldn't have children, and then she had Samson. They were so excited about that. But Samson was just a hard child to bring up, and then as a young adult, just miserable. And yet he harassed the Philistines. He didn't really lead Judah. They were kind of comfortable now with the Philistines controlling much of their land. And they said, if we don't rock the boat, the Philistines won't bother us so much. But Samson kept bothering the Philistines so much that the Israelites never could get too comfortable with the Philistines, because Samson was always messing with the Philistines, which is, I think, what God wanted them to do. He wanted Samson to make them not get so comfortable with the culture. Don't fit in. And they kind of got upset about Samson every once in a while. What are you doing? You're messing with the Philistines. They're going to come in and take our freedom away, that little freedom we have. But that's God's intention. Don't get so comfortable with this culture that the Philistines are giving to all of us. Judges chapter 14, and we'll just read a little bit of this, and then we'll get into the application. But you see, Samson was a young man. He was probably in his early 20s or whatever. And it says, one day Samson was in Timnah, and one of the Philistine women caught his eye. So he's out there in the Philistines' territory. Got out of the hill country, went down in the plains, because that's where you can party. That's where they had all the excitement. That's where they had all the women. That's where that was the cultural center, because they're in the hill country. But he wanted to go down to the Philistines, and he saw this woman. She came back and said, "Hey, Mom, Dad, I saw the girl I want to marry." They go, "Why'd you go down there? Why don't you marry one of the Israelite women? Why don't you just do that?" Because as a Nazarite, he had a vow as a Nazarite, and one of the things that the angel, and it was Jesus, told his mom and dad, one thing, you as a mother don't drink and don't take any of the fruit of the vine, and then when this boy grows up, never cut his hair. Nazarite vow had to do three things. They had to abstain from any wine or fermented drink or anything from the fruit of the vine. So that's Welch's grape juice and raisins and all that. Just has to stay away from everything. That was the vow that he had to take. Number two, he wasn't supposed to cut his hair. You all know about that, and later next week we'll look at that. And number three, he wasn't supposed to go near a dead body. Three things. Just three things, but don't cut your hair, don't eat anything from the fruit of the vine, and then don't go near a dead body. So those were the guidelines that he was supposed to follow. So he's down there and he saw this woman and he says, "I want to marry her. Get her for me." And her father and mother in verse 3 said, "Oh, why?" But Samson said, "Go get her for me. She looks good." That's it. Now the Lord, they didn't realize the Lord was working in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over Israel at the time. God just said, "I just want you to harass, so this is part of my plan." They didn't realize it, and God sometimes uses even bad situations for good situations. So they said, "All right, we'll head on down." So they start going down out of the hill country, Samson with his mom and dad, to work out a contract to marry this girl. And they're not too pleased about it. It's a Philistine girl, but they're going to go down there. And as they're walking down, a young lion suddenly attacks Samson. So this lion comes out of the bushes, and Samson, supernatural strength, saw this lion and says, "At that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him." Now, most of the pictures of Samson, you have this guy ripped, the dream of what I would like to look like, but it's just not there. Bulging muscles, long flowing hair, and all the Bible pictures are like that. Most of the commentaries probably say he wasn't that spectacular. He wasn't like, Mr. America. He wasn't ripped. He was probably just your average guy. But then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in such a way that it was just, look at this little guy just doing amazing feats, carrying city gates on his back. And then when a lion attacks, Spirit of the Lord comes, and look what it says. This is just amazing. It says, Spirit of the Lord, verse 6, came powerfully upon him, and he ripped the lion's jaws apart with his bare hands. This lion's about to grab him, and the mouth opens, and he just grabs in between the teeth and goes, and he throws the carcass, the dead lion, off to the side. It's amazing. But this next verse is pretty interesting. It says, the next part of the verse, he did it as easily as if it were a young goat. I go, really? I mean, it's like he just ripped the lion apart just like we usually do with a young goat. I mean, was that a thing? They just took a young goat and just go, "Oh, here's a young goat, let's rip it apart." I mean, look at that verse. It says, he ripped the lion's jaw apart with his bare hands. He did it as easily as if it were a young goat. It's like, oh, this is normally what we do. This is what we do. We rip young goats apart. Anyway, they go down, and so they go and get his wife, and so it says he talked with the woman, and he was very pleased with her, so this is going to work out. So they go back home, and they're going to have a wedding. So then they come back, and they're going to go back for the big wedding. And as they're going by and going down the same path, Samson's kind of hungry, and he remembers, oh man, this is where that lion came out. Let's be careful. I wonder if that lion's still over there. So he doesn't tell mom and dad, but he goes down to check out where that lion was, and sure enough, it's there, and he sees some bees there, and he goes, there's a honey nest down there. Whoa. And he goes down and grabs his honey and goes, man, the bees are all over, but he doesn't mind. He's Samson, Hey, yeah, I don't mind. And so he's eating honey, and mom and dad must be thinking, hey, Samson, what are you doing? Come on, let's go. I don't know. And he comes back and goes, hey, got some honey for you. I go, but he didn't tell them where he got it. Didn't tell them. It says that. Didn't tell mom and dad. In verse 9, he scooped up some honey into his hands, ate it along the way. He also gave it to his father and mother, and they ate it. But he didn't tell them where he had taken the honey from the carcass of the lion. Why? All good Jews, they know you don't touch the body of a dead animal or person, and especially because he's supposed to be taking this Nazirite vow, and you never touch the body, the carcass of something that's dead, ever. So he said, hey, have some honey. And they didn't say, where'd you get it? Oh, from a dead lion. No, I didn't say that. I don't know if Samson talked like that, but that's what he did. So he's just like, just this casual guy saying, I like this woman, she's a Philistine, I want to marry her. And I want some honey. I'm just going to eat it. I don't care about anything that, laws. And anyway, they go down and they make the final arrangement. And then Samson threw a party. And it was a custom for all these people to show up, And so they're coming to the party. And he didn't have a whole lot of friends. So his future in-laws invited some friends. Hey, come, 30 of you guys come. And we'll just have this little party celebration before the wedding. And then Samson, it was kind of a fun guy, and he liked what the Philistines did. He probably liked the partying scene. He kind of liked all these things. He comes up with a riddle. And he says, here's a riddle. If you can solve it in 7 days before this time is done, I'll give you all new outfits. But if you can't solve it, you give me 30, each of you, give me 30 new outfits. And that's expensive. You just can't go out and buy a new outfit. So he tells this riddle, and they have no idea what it is. This is it. In verse 14, out of the one who eats came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. They're going, huh? What? What? Say that again, Samson. Out of the one who eats came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. They have no idea. They have no idea. And they're going, this is crazy. We don't even know Samson. We don't even like Samson. We just came because, your mom and dad wanted us to come. They're talking to the bride. Now we're going to be broke. We just wanted to have a party. Now we have to buy a whole new outfit. We don't know what the answer is. Tell us. And the future wife goes, I don't know what the answer is. Well, tell us. If you don't, we're going to kill you. These are good friends. And she goes, whoa. And then she went to Samson. Samson didn't. Finally, she started to cry and, please tell me the answer. And finally, Samson said, all right, I'll tell you, And he gave her the answer. And then she told the friends. And then at the end of 7 days, they knew the answer. And so, verse 18, before sunset of the 7th day, the men of town came to Samson with their answer. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And Samson's going, oh, man. And he's a little upset now because he knows that the only way that they could have found out the answer was his future wife. And so he looks at the men, and this is, never call your wife this, but he goes this, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Really? He just called his future wife a heifer. I mean, that's really what, you read that, you go, that's what version are you reading? I'm reading New Living Translation. I'm not sure what it says in your Bible, your version, but it says that. If you don't call your wife a heifer, it's just not a good thing. But then he gets so upset, he still owes these guys clothing. So then the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him again, and he goes into town, and he murders 30 men, takes off their clothes. Here you go, guys. Comes back. Here's your clothing. You might want to wash those. A couple blood stains there. And that's what he does. He's just harassing these Philistines. And then he's in a huff and he takes off. Party's over. He's just angry. And so the bride's father and mother go, well, that didn't work out, did it? Samson's gone. And they asked the best man, you want to marry our daughter? Sure. So they got married. And Samson's off, and he takes off, and he's just in a huff. And then later on, he goes, you know what? I want to go back to my wife. Now, they actually didn't get married because he left in a huff. So he's going down, he grabs a young goat as a gift, comes down to mom and dad, knocks on the door. They open the door. Oh, no. It's Samson. Who's at the door? It's Samson. What's he want? I don't know. Comes in, Samson goes, I'm here to be with my wife. And they go, we didn't think you were going to come back. You know, you killed 30 people and you made this ruckus at the party. You got mad, you took off. So she got married to the best man. Ooh. You go, what's going on? So verse 2, I thought truly you must hate her, so I gave her in marriage to your best man. But look, here's the younger sister. She's even more beautiful than the other daughter. Take her, marry her instead. Sam said, this time I can't be blamed for what's going to happen now. And he's getting mad. His eyes are popping out, you know, and his muscles are just flexing what he had. And so he's just upset. So then he goes out. Now this is amazing. I mean, have you ever tried to catch like a lizard? They're fast, right? I can't. Samson goes out and catches a fox. And not just one. Do you see how many he caught? 300. How do you catch 300? Is it foxes or fox? Foxes. 300. 300. Where's he keeping them? I don't know how he did that. It doesn't say. He just caught 300 foxes. It just says it like he caught 300 foxes. How do you do that? And where do you keep them? And then for fun, he took 2 of them and he tied their tails together. And then he goes, oh, this will be fun. And look what he did. He fastened a torch to the pair of tails. So he's taken two tails, ties them together, then takes a torch, sticks it in the middle, secures it, and then takes these foxes and go, run. And they ran through all the wheat fields, all the crops that these Philistines had. And they're just lighting everything on fire. It's just, and you have all 150 torches going everywhere. And these foxes, they're just upset. My tail is on fire, you know. And they're attached to someone else. It's just, and Samson must go, that's so funny, you know. But he's just looking what he did, just harassing the Philistines. And it says he burned all the grain to the ground. I mean, planting a crop, watching it grow, taking care of it, and then suddenly some Israelite named Samson does this, and they're just upset. And they go, who did this? Samson. Everyone knows Samson by now. He's this little guy from the hill country that comes down and just messes up, and the Philistines now are paying attention. They go, what? They go, Samson did it because his father-in-law from Timnah gave Samson's wife to be married to his best man. So what are you going to do about it? Well, the Philistines, remember, Philistines are just mean. They're just cruel. So the Philistines went, got the woman and her father, and burned them to death. They just go, oh, you're the blame. He just burned all our crops. We're going to kill you. And they just burned them to death. This just gives you an idea of how the Philistines were. It's just amazing. And then Samson gets mad at them. He says, because you did this, you killed my wife that never really was my wife, I won't rest until I take my revenge on you. So he attacked the Philistines with great fury and killed many of them. Then he goes to live in a cave. And the Philistines are going, man, he just wrecked our crops. Now he killed a whole bunch of people. We're going to go find this guy. So they go up into the mountains and they're looking for him. The men of Judah, they're going, man, you're rocking the boat, Samson. Life was okay. And then you went down and found that girl. And then you had this fight. And then you set their crops on fire and you killed a bunch of men. Now they're coming. You're making a scene. So the Israelites, the men of Judah, they're looking at Samson and they go, what are you doing? So 3,000 men of Judah, these are his fellow Israelites. They're the same place, you know, same ethnicity. They went down to get Samson at the cave and they said to Samson, don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? Didn't you get the memo? They're in charge. Stop this. And they're upset about this. What are you doing to us? And Samson said, I only did to them what they did to me. But the men of Judah said, hey, we've come to tie you up, and we want to give you over to the Philistines. You can't be doing this. All right, but promise that you won't kill me. Go ahead. And so they tied him up. They brought him to the Philistines. They said, we'll only tie you up, and then we're going to give you to the Philistines. We won't kill you. So verse 14, Samson's arrived, and the Philistines came shouting in triumph. Here's this troublemaker, Samson, you killed a bunch of people, you set all our crops on fire. Yes! And then again it says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him powerfully. And he snapped the ropes on his arms as if they were burnt strands of flax. And he just snapped this rope. He looked around, saw a jawbone of a donkey. Hey, this is great, And he just killed it. The teeth are still there, and he starts swinging around, killing. Make a great movie. Bodies flying. And look how many he killed. 1,000. 1,000 Philistines. With the jawbone of a donkey. He said, I piled them in heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. Then he's tired, and he goes up there and he says, God, man, I just killed 1,000 men. I'm about to die. And the Lord said, hey, I'll give you something to drink. And it says here, verse 19, God caused water to gush out of a hollow in the ground at Lehi, and Samson was revived as he drank. And it says Samson judged Israel for 20 years, just harassing the Philistines. And then in chapter 16, we'll look at more in Delilah next week. Chapter 16 starts out and says, one day Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza, spent the night with a prostitute. Word spread that he was there, and that's where he escaped, took the city gates that they locked, and just carried him 48 miles and dumped him in the hills. He goes, Samson, you have the Spirit of the Lord on you all the time. You're blessed from your birth. You have this supernatural strength. Why are you wasting all of it? You're acting like an idiot. He actually was. Yet God, in his death, saw the faith of Samson as in his death trusted in God and again killed many of the enemy and constantly was used by God to harass the Philistines. But what can you learn? And how can you be an ideal idiot? Or how can you avoid being an ideal idiot? A couple things. Just assume, if this is what you want to do and be a complete Christian idiot, assume that great success always outweighs small sins. You say, everything's going all right now, so it's okay that, and for Samson, it's okay that I go down and want a Philistine wife. It's okay that I take some honey out of a dead body and disregard the laws that God has told me to avoid. It's okay, because God's not judging me. And every time he did that, you never saw God's punishment. Never. You say, well, these small sins aren't a big deal. He was like a little baby, a young Philistine woman, and Timnah caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me. He's a little spoiled kid. Get her for me. I want her. Little sins here, little sin there, little sin there. It just doesn't seem to bother God because it doesn't seem like he is doing anything. And if you assume that your little small sins don't add up, you're an idiot. Because they do. And eventually, if you don't confess your sins, if you don't repent, they're going to catch up to you. And it's not the best. I don't know if they were overlooking some things or trying to cut costs because it was getting too expensive. But as they built it, there were just things that were coming together. They've had some success over the years, and so they just were doing this, and somebody might have overlooked something, whatever, how that happened, you didn't know until suddenly, as you're gazing up into the sky and millions are watching, the Challenger just explodes, killing everyone on board. And people go, what happened? And then as they go and find that it was a little tiny O-ring that somehow wasn't placed right. And you go, that little small thing caused that explosion? Yeah. Sometimes you tend to forget because God just isn't doing much. But small sins do add up. And Samson just kind of avoided that. And so you just got to remember that your small sins do mean a lot. Don't be a Christian idiot. Secondly, selfishly, keep the blessings of God to yourself. Just figure that you're entitled to everything that comes your way. You're entitled to good things and all the blessings, and you're entitled to that. And if you want to be a Christian idiot, just be selfish and think that you deserve good health. You deserve an easy, comfortable life. Why? Because I'm entitled. It's what I do. When her son was born, she named him Samson, and the Lord blessed him as he grew up. Samson had the blessing of God upon him. It was a miraculous birth, conception, all that. Then he was growing up, and several times as I read the story, you see that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And he had so many blessings, but he didn't share it. He was a loner. You just never read that Samson did a whole lot together with other people. He was just a loner. And sometimes you look at things that you say, I have so much, but I deserve it. And if things aren't happening to me the way I want, what's going on? God likes to bless us, but often He uses the weak and the humble and those who are available. Even though you're busy, you say, God, I'm available. Samson was a man of faith, but he wasn't faithful. Samson had the influence of God, but he was a loner and didn't influence others. Selfishly, he lost everything. He lost the respect of his parents, the control of his tongue. He lost his temper, and eventually he lost even his strength because he just used it for himself all the time. This is a great verse that Jesus talked about. And he says, when someone has been given much, much will be required in return. When someone has been entrusted with much, even more will be required. Samson had a lot, but it doesn't seem like he shared it with anybody. We have a lot. We really do. I mean, we have a car, we have a house, we can have some spending money. We have a lot. What have you used for the glory of God and the benefit of others? And what have you done to share and be compassionate and to reach out? Or is always your prayers about your pain and your comfortable and comfort and all that? And that's okay to pray that way, but sometimes we need to learn the lesson of Samson. It's just not all about you, it's about others. God has blessed you, and we've been entrusted with much. You really have. And sometimes we don't think we have enough, and we're always thinking, it's me, I need to have things better, but there's always someone else who's not as good as you are. And God says, remember to look around and care for those. And don't be so selfish. Just care for others. And use that moment to glorify God. Third thing, confuse God's patience with God's pleasure. You say, God's been patient, it's all right. I don't mind. Samson judged Israel for 20 years during the period when the Philistines dominated the land. 20 years God blessed him. 20 years he had this strength. 20 years he did things. And we don't know all that he did, but we know that he took a wife or wanted a wife that he couldn't have, killed 30 men because he lost a bet. His anger got the better of him. He killed 1,000 men. I mean, he went and slept with a prostitute. What else did he do for 20 years? We don't know. But it didn't seem like God's judgment came upon him until next week as we'll look with Delilah. And finally, it hit. There's a verse in Deuteronomy that says, be sure your sins will find you out. It's not so much that God's approving of what people do, but He is very patient. But don't assume that God's patience is because He's pleased with what you're doing. Always check it out. And so realize, am I doing what's okay? Don't play with fire. You don't play with danger. You don't play with God. Don't mock God. There's a guy and his girlfriend for 13 summers. He went on some island up in Alaska and looking at grizzly bears. He thought he knew all about bears. He knew a lot. But that 13th summer, all of a sudden he disappeared, he and his girlfriend. And later on they just found out that they were both almost completely eaten by these bears that they came to study and appreciate because they lived within them. And sometimes we think that just because some bad things haven't happened, God's pleased. He's not, if it's not honoring to Him. We got to have a healthy fear of God. All the time, have a healthy fear of God. Obey God always. Please Him. Use your benefits and the things that you have to help others. Make the most of your time and live humbly. And the third thing, if you want to be a complete Christian idiot is just be confident enough to run into the enemy's territory all the time. That's what that man and his girlfriend did, running into the enemy's territory, living with the bear. What are you doing? Just doing it all the time. We need to make the most of our situation and be confident to share and help one another no matter what it's doing. One day Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute. What are you doing? It seems like every time you read about Samson, he was down in the Philistine area. He was down in Gaza. He was down and found a Philistine girl in a Philistine town. He was down there. What are you doing in the enemy's territory all the time? Sooner or later, Samson, you're going to get burned. Sooner or later, it's going to affect you. Paul wrote this in the book of Corinthians. It says, bad company corrupts good morals. No matter how good we are, if you just hang around people that are just crummy, you'll eventually get tainted by those people around you. Sometimes we just need to make the most of our time. Make the most of what you're doing. Make the most and take the opportunities they have to influence people and do what's right. Because like Samson, we've been blessed. Now, you don't have superhuman strength, but you have the Spirit of God upon you. Samson in the Old Testament, the Spirit of God came upon him at various times. For us, we have the Spirit of God living with us all the time. And so we have opportunities, and this week you're going to have an opportunity to just do something that glorifies God. Take advantage of that and do what you can. As we wrap this up, being in the wrong place at the wrong time is not a sin. It's just stupid. Ask God to help us avoid being an idiot. And I want to tell you this one story because I think it's so amazing that you just have these opportunities and you have to take advantage of that. It was 1978. And Herbert Humphrey had just died, January 1978. And so his funeral was there in Washington, and hundreds of people came from all over the world to give respect to Herbert Humphreys, who used to be in the Congress and was a vice president and ran for president, but he died. And everyone showed up. And in the back was somebody that was well known but not respected at all. And nobody was talking to that person in the back room. But he was there because he respected Herbert Humphreys, and he wanted to show his respect, and it was painful for him to go, but he still went. And he was there standing up against the wall, kind of being out of the way, because no one was talking to him. The President of the United States walked in, Jimmy Carter, was about to sit down and looked at the back wall, and there was that guy. Before he sat down, he went over to that guy, put out his hand, and says, "Mr. President, it's good to see you. Welcome home." And Richard Nixon stuck out his hand and shook Jimmy Carter's hand. And Jimmy Carter just went back and sat down. But that moment was recorded, and Newsweek magazine recorded it and wrote about it. And it was a little turning point in Richard Nixon's life, at the end of his life, that people at least realized he was our president. There was some things that he did well. Good job, Jimmy Carter. It was a handshake. And sometimes we can take the advantage of an opportunity and say, here's an opportunity, I can do something. And I don't need to waste this time like Samson, just kind of wasted all of his opportunities because he was selfish. And kind of was an idiot. But all of us at times are idiots, aren't we? But God says, the little opportunities that come your way, you can just extend some kindness. You can extend some love, some forgiveness. Make the most of your opportunities and honor God with what you do. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this time that we can be together. Thank you.